School-aged youth carry behavioral health challenges into public schools, requiring coordinated support before those needs narrow academic participation, peer connection, and safety. School social workers locate mental health barriers across the student, family, school, and community using individual, group, and family counseling, case management, advocacy, referrals, and school, family, and community coordination to extend assistance beyond the classroom conditions obstructing learning. That work must continue through students' academic lives, where school counselors integrate academic planning, career development, personal social guidance, coping strategies, peer relationships, and crisis response to protect engagement and forward movement through school. When emotional or behavioral concerns must be distinguished from learning and placement needs, school psychologists use psychological and academic testing, evaluation, individualized instructional interventions, direct counseling, and consultation to translate student distress into data-informed support matched to how the student learns and functions. School social workers, counselors, and psychologists operating as one coordinated student services system prevent mental health needs from being split apart across home, school, and learning demands, allowing distress that appears through absences, peer conflict, or declining academic performance to be addressed as a student support need rather than treated only as a behavior or school performance problem. In a school community, we cannot reduce student distress to behavior or school performance when behavioral health disorders and psychosocial pressures alter how children and teens participate in school. Depression in children and adolescents often presents through irritability rather than melancholy, leaving severe impairment in everyday functioning and serious school problems to narrow participation before adults recognize the condition as depression. Substance use carries behavioral health strain into behavior at home and school, where adolescent impulsivity and developmental egocentrism reduce attention to consequences, while alcohol or drug concerns can expose family system dysfunction and relationship pressures rather than an isolated student choice. Peer targeting adds a different pressure, as bullying and cyberbullying extend harm through insults, threats, exclusion, physical aggression, and online harassment, leaving students targeted for their identities vulnerable to poor school performance, depression, health problems, and isolation that can make participation itself feel unsafe. For a school community, behavioral health disorders and psychosocial harm extend beyond individual symptoms into students' daily school experience, turning routine attendance and peer interaction into points where distress accumulates and leaving students increasingly detached from the relationships and routines that keep them connected to school. For school teams, mental health status takes shape long before a symptom becomes visible through the conditions that sustain or strain a student's connection to school. Family relationships and parental involvement intersect with work schedules, poverty, language access, and rural transportation conditions, determining whether caregivers can participate in school-based counseling or reach services when a student's mental health needs first emerge. Peer and teacher relationships, school climate, conflict, discrimination, and community violence can carry distress into the school day, making school either a source of safety or an added pressure. Across those daily environments, extended family, faith community connections, community resources, and legal system or truancy involvement determine whether students facing ongoing stress have protective relationships available or remain without the wider support network needed to address underlying concerns. Whether support is available when stress first appears can interrupt or compound pressure across a student's daily environments, locating risk in the reliability of the conditions surrounding the child rather than in the child alone. Social media deserves the same careful scrutiny as any other part of a young person's environment. What matters is problematic use, marked by preoccupation and compulsive engagement despite negative consequences that disrupt relationships and ordinary functioning rather than simply reflecting platform frequency. A meta-analysis of 18 studies involving 9,269 participants ages 12 to 30 found moderate, significant associations between problematic social media use and depression, anxiety, and stress, with anxiety showing the strongest correlation at R equals 0.348. Yet the cross-sectional evidence cannot show whether problematic use worsens anxiety and depression or whether existing symptoms make young people more vulnerable to compulsive use, leaving the relationship potentially bidirectional rather than a single causal pathway. When measures of screen time cannot reveal functional disruption or show which condition comes first, prevention efforts cannot determine whether compulsive engagement, emotional distress, or both require intervention, leaving school and public health systems without a verified pathway on which to build intervention models. Social media can complicate youth mental health in some circumstances. Without erasing the benefits, it can also offer children and teens. Virtual communities organized around common interests, goals, and activities allow adolescents to reach peers beyond geographic boundaries to exchange questions, advice, and lived experiences. Shared membership with people facing similar challenges can turn distant contact into recognition and acceptance, countering social isolation through mutual participation. These spaces also allow self-expression and experimentation with roles, interests, values, and traits, giving adolescents room to explore identity and determine which forms of participation reflect their developing sense of self. Recognition beyond the peer groups immediately available to adolescents can diminish the degree to which local peer approval governs identity formation, compelling schools to judge belonging through students' accessible relationships across settings rather than treating physical inclusion in a local group as sufficient evidence of connection. School judgments about belonging remain incomplete when cultural assumptions shape which forms of student distress are recognized. Cultural competency locates student distress within micropressures such as fear and depression, mesopressures such as bias-based bullying, and macropressures such as immigration policy, preventing providers from separating symptoms from the conditions producing them. That broader interpretation places culturally biased assessment tools, teaching methods, and disciplinary practices under review, reducing the likelihood that culturally rooted behavior will be over-identified for behavioral services or disciplinary processes. Culturally responsive family engagement also adapts to non-English communication, rural transportation limits, and work schedules, allowing counseling and referrals to reach students whose caregivers cannot participate through prescribed school meeting times. Cultural competency makes the lived context of student distress part of school mental health support, requiring school practices to answer for whether that support recognizes or misreads student circumstances, and shaping how young people later approach public systems as places to seek help or expect exclusion. Young people develop expectations of public systems not only through school encounters, but also through the safety conditions they navigate, making Pinal County the local setting for examining youth crime. In 2021, Pinal County recorded 55 juvenile arrests for violent crimes among youth ages 8 to 17, a rate of 1.1 arrests per 1,000 youth, establishing a local baseline for homicide, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault arrests. That total rose to 101 juvenile violent crime arrests in 2022, with the rate reaching 2.0 per 1,000 youth and nearly doubling both measures from the prior local baseline. In 2023, the total declined to 90 juvenile violent crime arrests at a rate of 1.7 per 1,000 youth, remaining below 2022, but above the 2021 count and rate. Pinal County juvenile arrest data situate the conditions examined across this presentation within a local public safety context, recasting youth well-being from a school outcome into a measure of community capacity and foreclosing prevention when public action begins only after the conditions around young people require crisis response. Thank you for listening.